Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lynette Owens, and I am the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. Joining me today are our guests, Chanel Curry and Aaliyah Ward from Media Done Responsibly. And we also want to thank, and joining us today is Krista Lambert, who is our ASL interpreter. I want to encourage everybody to, at any point during this webinar, to submit questions at any time. And we will get to those towards the latter part of our session today. We will, I think this is going to be a great conversation. So if we can't get to all of your questions, we will definitely do that at the conclusion of the session. And finally, for those of you attending, at the conclusion, there is also a very quick survey taking 30 seconds of your time to give us some feedback. And if you do choose to submit feedback and give us your email address, you may win one of 5 copies to Trend Micro Maximum Security to secure up to 5 devices in your home. So with that, I just want to get a sense of who is with us today. And again, welcome from wherever you are. And have a couple questions for you. So the first is, what worries you most about your kids and social media? Is it too much screen time, which would be understandable? We're in a pandemic. Age inappropriate content, connecting with strangers, bullying, or false or inauthentic content, meaning not everything that they see is necessarily true, whether that's misinformation or the way someone is representing their true self. So if you could go ahead with the polling feature and provide us your thoughts on this. Which one of these worries you the most? Now, I have 2 teenagers, one of whom uses it more heavily than the other one. And I originally was worried about the last one and the second one. But through the course of this pandemic, I think it's shifted a little bit for me. So it'd be really interesting to see what all of you feel. We'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like it's a tight race between a few of these. Just a few more seconds. All right. We'll close the poll here. So it looks like the last one, false or inauthentic content, which is really, really closely followed by age inappropriate content. Thank you for that. And so another question that I'd like to ask and is very relevant to our topic today, and that is, how often do you see social media being used for good, for a good cause? All the time, almost never. It seems to do more harm than good, or I'm not really sure. So which one of these do you agree with? How often do you see social media being used for a good cause? And I believe that if I ran a social networking company, I would want everyone to answer this in a particular way. But those of us who've been using it for a while obviously have our own opinions. And I will let this run for just another couple seconds and then we'll end the polling. Okay, so it looks like most of you aren't sure, followed by never. It seems to be used for more harm than good. I have to say, I'm not really surprised by that sentiment. I think there are really good reasons that people feel this way about social media. And having done this work for a dozen years now, and watching the evolution of social media, and not only how it's impacted how we behave, but also the way in which it is a window into humanity. I think we're still at the beginnings of the evolution, and we obviously would like more of you when you are asked this question 1, 2, 3 years from now to answer A, or at least more of the time than not, which is why we want to have this conversation today. Now, a little bit about what's happened since the pandemic began. This is an alarming, stunning number. I believe it's about a 10% growth, but 3.96 billion people in the world now are social media users, more than half the world. I know this is not the case a year ago. In our sessions with younger kids, we would ask them, how many people do you think use social media? And it definitely wasn't this number. So this is obviously a result of the pandemic. We do know that one of the biggest proponents of this was TikTok. TikTok enjoyed 600 million downloads in just the first 6 months of this year. They now are up to 2 billion users. They're still dwarfed by Facebook and really catching up to Instagram. But it is one of the reasons why this number was propelled, as well as many other of the social networks out there. And because the risks to children are still there, even though the world changed and we're online a lot more, it doesn't change the need to talk to kids about using it in the ways that are safe, positive, and productive. So in our program, for those of you who are new to Trent's program, we do talk about the importance of teaching how kids to be online, but while they're there, to be safe, to be kind, and to be savvy. And while I won't go into too much of the details here, I invite you to visit our website, to reach out to us if you're willing, if you're interested in having an event in your communities and have one of our many staff people to come and present to your community. But a lot of times when people think about kids and technology, it's often coupled with fear and concern. And yes, it's important to teach kids about the risks. It's also important to teach them about how to behave. But one of the areas that we don't spend enough time on, and why we want to have this conversation with Chanel and Aaliyah today, is because this last one on being savvy is really about moving away from just telling kids what not to do and what to be afraid of, and make sure that we're giving equal time and attention to what we should do and what we can do with social media, with technology, with the internet, to make their own lives, other people's lives, and the world a better place. And that's why we're here today. And I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with Chanel and Aaliyah today. So again, I invite you to go to this website later on after today's call, take a look at our resources. Even though we won't touch on a lot of the topics I just mentioned, we're focusing on social media in particular today. And so we do have a tip sheet there. But what I would like to do is actually like to start this conversation with both Aaliyah and Chanel. So for our audience, welcome. Thank you so much for giving your time to us today. And Chanel, I'd like to start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you do with Media Done Responsibly? And I know you're also a professor. You're also involved in many other organizations. So, please tell us not just about Media Done Responsibly, but maybe how all of the things and all the hats you wear kind of dovetail from the work you started long ago.
Sounds good. And we only have an hour, right? Or 45 minutes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lynette. I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate you hosting this forum, taking the time to invite us. It's a really important topic. And I know a lot of parents, families, just community members are very interested in this. I am Shawnell Curry. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Media Done Responsibly. What we do, we are a public benefit organization that provides media literacy and digital citizenship training for young people. And we use a service learning model that provides college mentors for middle school and high school students, helping them to navigate the 24 hours of media that they consume regularly. And so we help dig into social emotional issues. We talk about some of the things that you mentioned earlier, from cyberbullying to body image to representation in media or misrepresentation or lack of representation in media. We have 3 pillars: media literacy, media production, and media justice advocacy. And so that's just a tidbit of Media Done Responsibly, and we'll delve more into it as we talk today. But in terms of other work that I do, I'm also a professor at California State University, Los Angeles, of TV, film, and media studies, journalism, and Pan-African studies. I am also the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the Digital Wellness Collective, which is a global trade association of media literacy and experts throughout the world. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I do.
Fantastic. And Aaliyah, you very possibly had to rearrange your busy schedule for us just to be here today. So thank you so much. I know you're a student, you're a senior in college now, but can you tell us a little bit about where you go to school, what your focus of study is right now, and how you connected with Media Done Responsibly?
I'm Aaliyah. Like you said before, I'm a 4th year at Cal State LA right now. My major is TVF, which is television and film, but recently I just picked up a minor in Pan-African Studies as well, so really excited about that. I first got involved with Media Done Responsibly through a class that Professor Curry was teaching at Cal State LA. So basically, the way the program works is that it's a civic engagement class. So I went into the class and I went through the program. I had somebody come in and train me on the curriculum and like how to teach the children. I went inside of the school, and then after that, I became an intern for the program. And it's been about a year since I started working with Professor Curry, and I have to say, like, I am very grateful for the work that she does as well as you guys, because it's something that I definitely wish I had when I was growing up in this new age of social media.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And I know as a senior, this has got to be a pretty challenging year for you in such an unusual way to finish out your college years. But I applaud you for your resilience and not letting it stop you.
Yeah.
So thank you. Well, I'd love to hear from both of your perspectives, specifically with your experiences, personally with social media, but also in your work with Media Done Responsibly. And what was the biggest change that you've seen since everything began in about March of this year? What changed the most in your opinion?
Wow, what a question. Thank you, Lynette. I mean, life flipped upside down, honestly. And a lot of our social norms and connections with family members, with people were just shut off. And it was so sudden. I think social media and using digital tools and media period became a form of kind of replacement or a substitute for that face-to-face human contact that we're used to when we were suddenly quarantined and, kind of didn't know what was going to happen with life. At that time, back in March, we thought the scariest thing that it was that it might be a whole month that we would be quarantined, right? Like, yeah. Oh my gosh, we need to get in survival mode for 30 days. And here we are, and it's October, and we're still dealing with this. And so we had to make some really major adjustments. I hear a lot about Zoom fatigue, but Zoom became our best friend for a very long time, just figuring out a way to adapt. How do we engage in business? How do we engage with our human contact? I think a lot shifted in terms of, like you mentioned, TikTok. Instagram was another one as well, where people began doing a lot more streaming of their work and business, as well as just personal connection with friends. People were having Zoom cocktails, etc., and parties. My birthday party in April was on Zoom. So, we learn to adapt as humans do. We're resilient. But I think there were certain issues in terms of this feeling of loneliness that people started to really experience in deeper ways than before, and realizing that technology could not completely fill that gap.
Yes, I would have to say, I believe Zoom in 1 week grew 728%. There was some enormous, unbelievable growth rate that both, I think, Zoom and House Party were the top two that grew the most over the last those few months. And for you, Aaliyah, as a college student, we know that, my goodness, these are the years where socializing with peers is the most important. I don't know how did you adapt?
So I have to say I'm still adapting. It is a big, big change for me. But I think most importantly to me, it was just keeping the people that I love safe. So, even if it means we have to spend a little bit of time apart, I think it will be okay. And in that way, I'm grateful for social media because it's definitely like a good tool for keeping me connected with the people that I love and the people that I care about and things like that. But at the same time, like you're talking about TikTok, and it's like it can also be like a rabbit hole, huge time waster. Like I'm constantly having to pull myself off the phone, like you have to do your work, So it's definitely like a big adjustment, and I think it has like its pros and cons, but I'm grateful for it, I will say.
Well, you're right, and I think that's the temptation. It's not unlike some foods, actually. You know, like if you like ice cream or candy or chocolate or potato chips, a little bit's okay, and then there's a point where it's not okay anymore. So I hear you, Aaliyah. Um, and with regard to your work at Media Done Responsibly, was there anything that happened over the last 6 months where all of a sudden you saw people using social media in ways that either excited you or concerned you?
Yes, thanks, Lynette. And I have to add, since you mentioned the binging, might have binged on chocolate once or twice during the pandemic. But yes, like I said, there was such a huge shift. And with Media Done Responsibly, we were already addressing issues of cyberbullying, body image, etc. Things that our young people were telling us were becoming problems for them when they get sucked into this endless hole that Aaliyah is talking about. And so providing strategies for them when our time now has become exponential in terms of screen time, where we have to be online in order to survive, to communicate, and to connect. I thought that was really critical. And one of the things that Media Done Responsibly did was we created safe spaces, safe online spaces. And you have to understand that there was also this simultaneous issue of the pandemic, as well as this kind of new awakening of police brutality and state violence, and the great movement of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, all of this kind of coalesced at one time in a space where people had to see it, right? We were seeing these videos of these atrocious murders happening. And so there was also this angst and anxiety, and people could not do the things that we would normally do, right? Couldn't connect with people and our loved ones and our family members in person. And so part of what we did was created safe spaces to have civil dialogue about what was happening. We created these spaces where there are codes of ethics, where there are conversation agreements, that are set in place in the beginning so that there's no space for trolling, there's no space for bullying, there's no space for even really debate. We wanted a forum where there was empathy, where there was the practice of listening and hearing each other's voices and authentic communication. And I tell you, our young people were moved, community members were moved by this. We had people from all over the country who had never met before, but came together in this space and were sharing really vulnerable parts of their lives. There were tears, there was connection, there was hope. And I feel like that is something that we really want to put an emphasis on. So Media Done Responsibly is creating an ongoing platform now to create civil dialogue, to connect with people and allow people to connect, and specifically our members, so they know that instead of going to a traditional online social media space where there could be a number of trolls, et cetera, that are happening, they can come into a community and be served in that community as a safe space for them.
Fantastic. I would be very interested in participating in some of those spaces. But I might have been born in the wrong year, because sounds like it's a fantastic place for the younger for the students that you're serving. So maybe we can learn a few things about, imagine that, civil discourse
Yes,
on
absolutely.
some of the public platforms.
Yes.
I don't think that's a dream that's too far away. That's really up to us, in my opinion. But Aaliyah, when you compare, let's say, that the platforms you love to use to the one that Chanel is talking about, I mean, what's the difference between the two? And can we bring some of that over to the public spaces like Instagram and Snapchat and even Facebook? I'm not sure you use Facebook, but even Facebook. Twitter, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think right now there's such like great polarization going on, like in society, that nobody's really doing any listening. So everybody's just thinking that they're right. And, so I think the model that Professor Curry does, we even do this. I have her class currently right now. And like, it's amazing. I've had like some of the best conversations from school, just from being able to have these open conversations and like, just like she said, just listening, because that's all it really takes. But I feel like a lot of people get so caught up in defending, they want to defend themselves. So I think, yeah, most importantly, like what she said, just listen, like listening to each other and having that open dialogue and not just being so concerned. And that's what a lot of what I'm seeing on a lot of the sites I use, Instagram, Twitter, everything. Everybody just, instead of listening to each other, they just want to be right.
Or it's like the equivalent, all caps, yeah, if I just shout louder than you, then I only have to hear me, and you only have to hear me. I don't have to hear anybody else. Which brings up an interesting point, and that is, lack of civil discourse, misinformation, bullying, even scams, cybercrime. We know that these are ills of the internet, precipitated by social media. They're not just on social media, but we know that social media gives it fertile ground to grow. Who do you think is responsible to fix this? I don't know how many times Mark Zuckerberg is called to testify on Capitol Hill. Fix your company, fix your platform. Is it them? Could they be doing things better? Is it us? Is this something else?
Lynette, one of my favorite ways of looking at the word responsibility is the ability to respond, and understanding who has the ability to respond, not just from a place and a standpoint of who is to quote unquote blame. I think sometimes we look at responsibility in terms of blame as opposed to who can be accountable in this moment. And I think that's all of us. With Media Done Responsibly, our focus is on every stage of social responsibility in media. So from the standpoint of the consumer, from the standpoint of the technologists and the developers, from the billion-trillion-dollar companies that are running these platforms, there's responsibility all around. And I think that's really important for us to understand. I would also say that a big piece of what we do and what needs to be merged in our education system is media literacy and digital literacy. It's important for us to understand not only what the issue is, but our agency and our power to make change. And that is something I think that is missing. A lot of times we might be afraid because we're afraid of things that we don't understand or that we think are so huge and enormous, like the media industry. It's so huge and enormous. How can I possibly make change? So it's easier to say someone else fix it than what can I do to create change? There are agencies and companies right now that are focused on creating things like anti-racist technology, ethical technology, and apps that are non-addictive. So it's up to us to seek out these different platforms. They might not necessarily be the most popular right now, but it's important for us to find these platforms, find educational institutions like Media Done Responsibly. And we're not the only one. There are many others that are doing this work to help to educate young people so that they will it'll become secondhand to them to do a specific search to understand, okay, this particular source is not credible. How do I identify a credible source versus a source that is not credible so that I'm not gullible and buying into everything that I'm told? But it definitely also is the responsibility of the tech companies as well. So we have to look at every different element and see where can I make that change.
Fantastic. And Aaliyah, I think, you know, you did this really interesting as a mentor when you were going into some of the middle schools, I think, is that right? That you were going into, there was an interesting exercise that you did to illuminate some of the things about social media that's really of concern. So I'd love to hear more about what it is that you did with those students to help teach some of the skills that Chanel was talking about.
Yeah, so basically what I did is I used the curriculum from Media Done Responsibly, and I took them through a presentation where we did like several activities. And one of the biggest things that I did, I feel like kids or younger people, when you mention lecture, they're just like, oh, like, no, like, I'm not gonna listen. They just tune out from the beginning. So I try to make my presentations like really visual, less words, more pictures. So what I did is I found some really shocking pictures on the internet of like, you know, people on Instagram, like just typical people that you would see maybe who would have a lot of followers or whatnot. I also found a picture of a girl who did an experiment where she posted an unedited, unfiltered picture of herself just to see how many likes that she got. And then she posted an edited version after, and she really got more likes on the edited photo. And that was like her experiment. So when I showed these images, a lot of the kids were just like, oh my God, like, are you serious? Because they're not seeing the befores, you know, they're only seeing the afters. So they were like, are you serious? And like, it was a really good, because after that, you know, I went into my activity, and after all the kids saw that, they were just like super, they were like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to go. Yes, you're showing the images that I showed in my presentation right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so the one on the left is the girl who did the experiment. The picture on the most far left is her before, like no filter, anything, just her. And the picture on the right is like a typical beauty filter that you would see a lot of Instagram users using. And then a picture on the right is of, I'm honestly not sure of her name, but she's like what you would call like an Instagram model. And this is honestly, prior to this was just 3 years before the picture on the right. And as you can see, there's like drastic differences in like how she looks. And I was just explaining to a lot of the kids that, you know, this is what you see, but just because you see it, it doesn't mean that it's authentic, and doesn't mean that it's real. So, you know, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to these things, these standards that aren't even, they're not reachable, honestly, because these people don't even look like that, you know? So
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that concerns me about the technology. And by the way, this is Rue, who just decided to join us today behind me on the table. But it's amazing that the companies are spending a lot of time on filtering and media editing technologies to win customers, to win users. I as Instagram have to compete against Snapchat, have to compete against TikTok. You can see everybody's launching their version of the short form videos now to compete with TikTok. Um, Instead of directing that energy towards the issues that you're highlighting, Aaliyah, which is, maybe that wasn't the best use of engineering time. Maybe there's a way to create spaces like you have, Chanel, for civil discourse, for better listening. Um, uh, it's a hard question. It belongs to all of us, and yet today it belongs to no one. So I like how you couch this, Chanel. It's the ability to respond. That's what Spider-Man should have said. I think he said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Um, so, we talk a lot about the things that concern us with social media, but, today we wanted to make sure we spent equal or as much time or more time on the other side of it, which is how can we use this tool to make the world a better place, to do something good? So in your experiences, personal or professional, can you share examples of how people have used social media in positive ways?
Absolutely. I think even during the pandemic, I saw people come together and build community around social media in ways that I would not have imagined before. I've seen DJ D Nice, for instance. He was one who did created Club Quarantine, where he had 100,000 people come on at one time onto Instagram, where he just got on and he played music for people. And people were in the chat and they were pretending like they were out at a nightclub or something, and just having this experience of coming together with other human beings. I remember, I have to admit, I did dance for an hour straight, right? Just listening to his music and feeling this connection. And so, media can be a very powerful tool if we use it in that way. The music brings us together, art brings us together. One of the things that we're doing with our platform to add to the civil dialogue is incorporate film that represents positive humanity, stories that tell and centralize our humanity, music, art, etc. These are what people come together for, right? These are things that excite us, that connect our shared experiences, that allow us to tell our stories in powerful ways. And so to do that in a space that we know is safe, to create those pockets of safe spaces everywhere without being reliant on major technology to say this is how it's supposed to be done, is really, really important. And I know even the example that Aaliyah gave with the presentation that they did, there's always that element of what we call media justice advocacy. How do you take whatever that issue area is? So for Aaliyah's project, it was around body image and body positivity. And how do you then flip that on its head and use it as a tool for social good? And she can talk a little bit more about that.
So what we did after I showed them those images and we went through some activities, basically what I was trying to stress to them is it's okay to be who you are. You do not need a filter. You do not need to edit. You don't need to do anything. So part of the change that my group and I tried to create is we created a hashtag because hashtags are like popular with the kids. So we created a hashtag and the hashtag was as you are MDR. So we asked the kids to take a picture of themselves, selfie, whatnot, post it to Instagram, Snapchat, or, whatever social media they wanted to, but make sure it was unedited, unfiltered, just a completely natural picture of themselves, just celebrating who they are, like in this moment, without all of the extra things, without feeling like they have to meet these certain standards. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think that's body image is one of those areas where I think again, media can be edited. Social media is media, and media can be edited. So people use that or abuse that however they wish. But I think it's very empowering, Aaliyah, to come in with a counter force like you did, to say, but you don't need to do that. Just because it's there doesn't, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I'd love to get, if, well, one more thing I do want to talk about, because I think, Aaliyah, we also talked about, after George Floyd and some of the protests that were being organized around where you live, that social media was your go-to to know where to go, to know how to show up and be safe when you were there. Can you walk us through that experience a little bit, and how social media helped you participate in something that mattered to you?
Yes. So, after everything that's been going on with a lot of like the police brutality and things, me and a few of my friends felt that it was important that we attended a protest because we don't believe in a lot of the things that are going on right now. So, basically all the information we had, we found online. We found where the protests were. We found like resources and like tons and tons of information on what you should bring to be safe, things to neutralize tear gas. We did end up getting tear gas, unfortunately, but I had like baking soda and water in my bag, and I was able to not only help out myself and my friends, but also like people around me. There were like so many people coming together like, hey, we're going to be at the protest today. I have first aid, I have water, I have snacks, find me if you need me. If you need me for anything, I have your back. So it was really cool to see the community developing like around this. And I feel like that was one of the really good things that came out of social media use during this time, is that people were able to build community and connections. And yeah, it was really great despite what the news said about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. I'm glad that you were able to participate and that you're safe, for sure. So I think, what if my child said, I really want to do X and I want to use social media to help me with X. Let's say X is, I really care, something to do with, raising money for a charity or raising awareness for a cause I really care about. What are 2 or 3 things you would recommend that I teach my child or encourage my child to do in order to accomplish that?
Excellent question. I think having an understanding of strategy in advance is really important. And part of what we do at Media Done Responsibly, we have 3 pillars: media literacy, media production, and media justice advocacy. And if you want to show the slide for
Sure.
media justice advocacy, we have 4 specific frameworks that we use for young people to create some sort of advocacy campaign to do just what you talked about, create change in an area that is important to them. So we have them look at these 4 areas. One is issue, the second is resources, the third is response, and the fourth is impact. And I'll go back through those. And this is specifically things also that Aaliyah, when she goes into the middle schools and high schools, she teaches those students how to do that. And they do practice advocacy campaigns. But the first is to really identify what the issue is. What's the problem? Who is the community that is being impacted by this problem? And we look at everything from the age to the ethnicity to maybe the gender or where they are on the gender spectrum, sexual orientation, etc. Like, who is it? Who is that person that you really want to impact? And that is feeling the pressures of whatever this particular issue is that you're wanting to address. So being really clear about that issue is the first thing that is important to do. The second thing is to understand the resources that are available. We have, I say quote unquote, free online platforms. I say quote unquote because we both know that just signing up for online platforms, you are giving away your personal data. So it's not really free, but not having to pay for it. But there are these tools that are at your fingertips that you can utilize. So all the social media that we've talked about, as well as finding some of the other humane tech and resources that I mentioned earlier, are really important. So how do you want to use those platforms to address the issue? Do you want to create some sort of e-petition, video, PSA, like Aaliyah's group did, a hashtag they wanted to get to trend along with the photos of themselves? So really think specifically about what that is in terms of the resource you want to use to raise awareness. The third thing is response. What do you want the community to do in response to the action that you're taking? Do you want them to sign a petition? Do you want them to cause the hashtag to trend? Do you want them to also take a photo and put the hashtag and spread the word? Like, what specific things do you want to move the audience to do? And then the final thing is impact. At the end of the day, your whole goal is to move the needle in some kind of way. So what does that then look like? What are the results of the action that you've taken? Are more people now searching out and seeking more responsible media? Are more people engaged in civil discourse and civil dialogue and finding safe spaces online to go in order to do that? So, and how do you measure that? So that's looking at the impact. So those are the four things that we see as really important to think through in advance of doing some sort of campaign, so that it's organized, so that you know how to measure it, so you understand specifically what it is that you're measuring, and so that you can feel good about the social change that you're embarking upon.
That's fantastic. And I think, and we'll make that that rubric available to everybody on our website, if you don't mind, Chanel, or
Yes,
any other
that's
resources
fantastic.
that you want to recommend to our audiences. I think for all of the parents out there, you know, our kids are using screens more than ever. But I think especially for kids of any age, to open their eyes that it can be used for more than just wasting time and laughing, and just sort of binge watching YouTube video after YouTube video. It's never too early to have that conversation. So this is a great exercise and framework to start to encourage that. And we know our children all care about something. There are
Yes.
things they do care about. So you could practice this, I assume, in a small scale with just, let's say, family or neighbors.
Absolutely.
It's not unlike the raising the money for my team or my school. We do this already. We've been doing this forever as a society. So, you know, consider using some online places and having them practice that now before, you know, they get older.
And Lynette, can I just add something to that really
Sure.
quickly? What you said about doing it with your family, I think is really important. The key also is the issue that the child is concerned about. A lot of time, one of the things that we say when we go in to present is we're not your parent coming and telling you what to think and what to do, but really asking them what's important to you and letting it be their mission and walking them through those steps with them. They will feel heard. It will help to create bond with family, and they will feel like, okay, my folks are listening to me, you know, sometimes for the first time, but you know, they may feel like that even though we are listening, but it's really important to do that and to hear their voices in that way. And so they feel empowered with that.
Yeah, and it looks like we're going to be in this scenario, staying home, staying safe. We're going to be online for a little while longer, maybe forever, and depending on it in the ways that we've had to depend on it in the last 6 months. I'd like to actually open it up to questions. And again, we have a few already coming through, and I appreciate the audience for sending them in. And here's one that either of you could comment on. One of the things that seems really negative about social media is basically the algorithms that are deciding what we see, who the friend suggestions are, even what the promoted posts are, even though those are paid for. But there's basically machines deciding what our experience. And my favorite example is that if my daughter and I in the same house search for the same movie on two different devices under both of our Google accounts, let's say, she may see a different list of search results than I see because of these algorithms and artificial intelligence. So do you think there's a way we can fix that? How do you fix it? Feels like a huge question, but love for both of you to comment on this.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. Thank you so much. It is a huge question. I recently facilitated a panel discussion with the filmmaker for The Social Dilemma, which is on Netflix right now, which talks about a lot of these different issues. There's another film as well called Coded Bias that digs into the racist technology or biased technology and looks at anti-racism in technology as well. And so it's a huge issue, the algorithms ending up in these echo chambers. I think a big part of it, again, I think it's very multi-layered. So it has to be addressed on multiple levels, you know, looking at things from antitrust laws to what the big media companies are doing, the developers, the technologists, being very specific and not creating technology that is addictive or that is reliant upon these algorithms. But then also from our perspective as just regular everyday consumers, being aware of this is really important and learning how to kind of curate your own path through media. Specifically seek out media that is not automatically sent to you. Search for media that might be quote unquote the opposite of what you would normally listen to. Aaliyah brought out a good point earlier when she talked about polarization, and that polarization being a result of us being in these echo chambers of like-minded people who only agree with us, until we get out into these other platforms and see so many different viewpoints. And then we have an adverse reaction, that cognitive dissonance that we have. And instead of running from that cognitive dissonance, one of the things that I teach our students as well as in the program is to sit with it and to practice that point of listening, hearing another viewpoint. It doesn't mean that you're going to completely change your mind, but allow another person to have space to share their ideas. And then you also present your authentic ideas as well with as much fervor and authenticity as is possible. So I think bringing our humanity back to the table is critical, not just relying on the technology to be humane, but making sure we add our humanity into the platforms that we're a part of is really critical in this. And again, that's a part of what we're doing with creating these safe spaces and curating these safe spaces.
Yeah, I think there's another place where this could potentially be solved, and that is taking a look at who's building it. Because these algorithms were built by human beings, and the question is, who are they? And if that group is not well representative of humanity, as you say, then the way in which it works is not really representing all of us, right?
Exactly.
So, again, I don't want to put everything on the tech companies. A lot of the problems we see is on us too. I mean, we could choose to pause before we react. We could choose to pause before we believe it. We choose to pause before we're upset about it, respond to it, like it, share it. That is something I think we can do now with our kids. Count to 5 before you do anything with anything you see online. Do the homework. So I have another question here, and this is a really great one. My kids use social media for fun and entertainment. They're 10 and 13. Perfect ages, by the way, for this. How do I prepare them and show them how to have a voice about the things they really care about? And any books or movies that you might recommend, or any other resource that you'd recommend? Because we don't think that kids are seeing the potential good side of social media and how much their voice really matters. Any recommendations? I know you gave a few, Chanel, but those might be a little bit older for a 10 or 13-year-old.
Right. Those are a little bit older for 10 or 13-year-olds. There are some, I'm trying to think, because, I work with college students. So some of my resources are going to be for students who are of an older age. However, there have been lists, and I do have access to some that I can present to you that you can share on the website if you're interested in that, because there are definitely resources for younger students as well to have in terms of reading and also watching material. I would also find there are companies who provide like ratings for young people for particular films and books, etc. And so I would look into some of those as well, who provide a specific rating. And then the other thing I would say is to get involved in some sort of media literacy program in your community for your young people. And so we are out here right now, as a matter of fact, with the quarantine. Part of the benefit of it is we're able to do presentations for people all over the world. So, we're we're on the West Coast. So usually we would be focused there, but now we're doing presentations for young people on the East Coast, etc. So I would get engaged with other young people who can support your younger child as well, to talk to them and to engage them.
Thank you. And I would recommend too, by the way, if you just want to, two things I'd recommend too, and it's important that when you see those good stories, and you know what they are because that you come across them and it makes you feel good, like, oh, that's so nice. When you see them, please share them with your children. Show them what being great and good and positivity looks like on social media, because they may not be seeing this. Again, the algorithms, based on what they follow, who they're following, who they're connected to, and what they like, might be getting in the way of them seeing that. The second is, I'm a big fan of the Good News Network. Just check it out once in a while. Follow them. I think they're on most of the platforms. And then you'll just, every day, if you just need that dose of, thank goodness not everything is wrong out there, I highly recommend people to do that. And so I think with that, we're gonna wrap things up. I do encourage anybody, if you have additional questions, submit them through the feedback form that you might get, or send it to us. You'll see a contact form on our website. I also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to share this resource that Chanel went through, to give you, a framework to share and use with your children if they're ever interested, perhaps as a school project or maybe a community of friends or classmates. Use this time while we're in the pandemic. Use this time, and in a way that I think could be really powerful and beneficial for them. And I do want to remind everybody that we have our next session coming up in 2 weeks with Dr. Michael Rich, who was with us back earlier this year, to talk about supporting our kids' physical, mental, and digital wellness. And if you, at the conclusion of today, want to give us your feedback and also leave your email address, you may be one of 5 people who will win a copy of Trend Micro Maximum Security to protect 5 devices, up to 5 devices in your home. So again, I want to thank our guests today, Aaliyah, Chanel. Thank you for your insight, for all the great work you're doing for the world where you are, even though you have to do it where you can't be traveling as much as you probably would be otherwise. And I do hope one of these days we'll get the chance to meet in person. Certainly give me a ring if you're ever in the Boston area, and I will do the same if I'm ever back in LA. Thank you so much to Krista for being with us today as well. And to all of you out there, I appreciate your time for listening. Please do fill out the survey and take a look at some of the resources we have on internetsafety.trendmicro.com. And please do join us for our upcoming session in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, everybody.
Lynette.
Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this invite. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Pleasure.